Hello, Gravity. Ready for Gravity Girl Wednesdays? Episode 3, Earth Day. Let's go. Alright guys, sorry I don't have a better cold open. Still gotta work on that. The band you're listening to right now is called Off and Home, and their song Keep It In. These guys actually went to the same college I go to, and all of them are really good friends of mine. And they're also one of my favorite bands ever. So check them out, they're on Spotify and Apple Music. So, got 2 challenges for you guys today. First one is going to be to bike 30 miles this week. You should probably break that up and not do it all at once. That's just like 5 miles a day if you do 6 days of that. Pretty easy and pretty fun. We got a lot of really good bike trails around here. And then secondly, I'd encourage you guys this coming week to read Ecclesiastes 8 through 9. If you break that up, there are 6 sections, or at least there are 6 sections in my Bible, like 6 headings. If you just do 1 a day, that'll get you through the entire book, and really break it down, write it out, what it means in your own words, what you believe it means, and then any questions that you have, because we'll be taking a look at those 2 passages next week. However, this week we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes 7 and just Ecclesiastes 7. I was trying to do 2 chapters at a time, but this one's super dense, so we're going to break that down and parse it apart a little bit. But before I do that, before we jump in, I'm going to have you guys pause this video and go ahead and read the chapter, and then I'm going to pray, and we'll start off. So, pause it. Pause the video. Do it. Pause it. Anyway, let's pray. God, thanks for this day. I pray that we draw closer to you, Lord, and learn from you, from your word, that it would change us and not just keep us the same way. Thank you that it has the power to do that, so pray that you do that in my life as well as these students. And even pray. Amen. Alright guys, well, if you remember all the way back to when we started Ecclesiastes, Solomon says that what's the point of wisdom? It seems meaningless because if you increase wisdom, then you also increase sorrow. I believe he says that in Ecclesiastes 1:18. But here, Solomon reevaluates that claim, and he comes to the conclusion that it has 3 benefits. And we're going to break each one of these down a bit more as we study Ecclesiastes 7. But in general, wisdom makes life better, gives us clarity, and makes us stronger. So first, we're going to look at how it makes life better. And I'm going to have little sections down right here, which are going to say the verses that we're covering, as well as the kind of caption on those. So the first thing we're going to look at that Solomon says, he says the day of death is better than the day of birth. There's this store in the Rivertown Mall in Grand Rapids, which when I was living there, I loved to go to, because they had all these soaps, and you could just smell the soaps, and they were like handmade, and some of them smelled like birch bark, and some of them smelled like driftwood, and they were kind of like manly scents, and then there were some feminine ones, and then some like really outlandish ones, but a ton of them smelled really, really, really good. But something I love even more than that, someone I loved even more than that was my grandpa. He passed away last summer, but he was one of the kindest guys I've ever known. Super loving, and he always had a funny story to tell. I thought I could one-up him in storytelling, and I never could. When he died, there were tons and tons of people at his funeral. His TV provider showed up. Apparently, they showed up one day to set up his, I think they worked for Verizon, and they were there to, what was the other one? Their color was red, though. There are like so many TV providers with red. Anyway, so they showed up at his house one day, and he sits down with them, finds out they're both believers, and they all just have a great time. So they showed up, and I mean, it was just mobs and mobs and mobs of people. So why do I tell you about soaps I love versus my grandpa? Well, and also my grandpa. Well, the first verse of Ecclesiastes 7 says, "A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death better than the day of birth." And those kind of are a little confusing. So in the same way that there's like good smells that I can remember, and then there's also like bad smells that I remember, a good name does the same thing. A good name being, when you think of someone, you don't think of, I mean, you might think of what they look like or what they smell like, but overall, those things, and whether or not we like those things, are often very much tied back to what they do. A person's character is the sum of their actions, and a good character is better, is sweeter than good smells. And when do you find out the content of a person's character? Now, this isn't the only judge, but it's not at the beginning of someone's life. It's at the end, right? How many people's lives do we impact? Who would be at your funeral? Who would be at mine? What would people say about us? And so Solomon carries on with this, with that question, and he says it's better to be sorrowful and to consider that than to just go through life and never consider it. Because a lot of times people avoid that through laughter, through joking around. They never face the true and really kind of sobering truth of life, that we are going to die one day. And everything I do, everything I've done, is going to be laid out at Jesus' feet. God's going to judge how faithful I was. Now, for those of us who are believers, we don't have to worry about whether or not that sends us to heaven or hell, but at the same time, what do you want your life to mean? It's one of the biggest questions you can ever ask yourself. Solomon continues, and now he talks about living our life. He talks about how the song of fools is like thorns under a pot. What does that mean? Well, for any of you who have started fires, when you light up kindling, it gets really hot, really bright, really fast, and then dies out super fast. Now, if you got a pot over that, then you're trying to cook something, and so that's not going to help you out at all. What's going to help is a real flame, something that you can actually cook with, something that can actually burn. And what is that here? It's the rebukeful wise person. It's designed to be helpful so that you can actually laugh and joke and be joyful. When we consider sorrow, it doesn't mean that we have to stay there and just be like super serious all the time, but it actually makes room for true joy, because I can go out and live and enjoy life. The times when I make jokes are sometimes when I've been really afraid, and so I do that to avoid the truth rather than to face it. But when we face the truth, come to terms with that and allow that to adjust our lives, then we can actually find true joy, true happiness in the middle of it. Turning the page. Solomon moves on to another principle that we can apply to our lives to make it better, and that is, the long haul is better than the shortcut. Something done quick or done right, which is better, if you had to choose? Solomon talks about oppression, so forcing people into doing things for you, or giving or taking a bribe, either quick money or using money to influence something in your favor. It seems like a really easy way to do stuff, right? At the end, it leads to madness and corruption of heart. Now, why does it corrupt us? Because it puts us in the place of God. When I distort justice by oppressing someone else, or by, if I was in court and bribed someone, it perverts justice to favor me. And I'm becoming God rather than treating everyone equally with the respect they deserve, because God's God and I'm not. Right? And so that slowly corrupts your heart and leads to madness. That's a crazy frame of mind to be in. Now, I'm guessing most of us are probably not going to bribe a judge in court. I'm guessing most of us are probably not going to oppress a people group. At least not right now. You might when you're older. We'll see. So how does that apply to us? Well, it's any kind of manipulation, right? Are you being honest? Or do you say things to try to get people to do stuff? When you do your work, do you do it to the best of your ability for God? Or is it just you do the bare minimum? Because it's easy to not reap what you sow right now, but eventually a lot of life comes down to, are you a good worker? Are you faithful to what you've been given? Are you a kind person? People gravitate in and out of your life based on how you treat them. And Solomon says, the end of a thing is better than the beginning. So it's better to do something right than get that quick result right now. Because getting the beginning of whatever you want, that's not what you really want. You want the thing of itself, and the longer you have it for. What this brings to mind really for me is like relationships, right? So do you try to get buddy-buddy with a person just to get them to like you? Because oftentimes you can do that just for their approval. Because that kind of feels good, right? And it's not wrong to be liked. But am I saying stuff just for someone to like me? Then that goes for both friendships and dating relationships, either or here. Or am I truly being myself around them, truly caring for them, and truly just being a person, not trying to get something, not trying to get liked, not trying to get attention? Am I a person? Am I real? Often Satan comes in offering a shortcut, but we need to prioritize doing the right thing over doing the quick thing. And then we're going to skip over a verse here. We're going to come back to verse 9, but in verse 10, it says that don't say, oh, days before now are better than the current days that we're in. Super easy to do with quarantine, right? Like missing friends, and it's not wrong to miss friends, but oftentimes when life gets hard, we tend to think of the good old days, and we idolize, yeah, I guess that'd be the right word. We tend to idealize the past. The people of Israel did this when they came out of Egypt, and they're like, oh, at least in Egypt we had bread to eat. It's like, okay, but you were like slaves and stuff. It's easy to not trust God in moments of trial. But here Solomon says that when we say, oh, the previous days were better than this, he says that's not wise. That's not a true statement. Yeah, it's okay to miss stuff from times previous, but it doesn't mean it's actually true. It means that we're actually thinking about this from the wrong perspective. Romans 8:28, right? God is going to does all things for our good and His glory. But what's His definition of good? To make us like Christ. He is how we're supposed to live and how we're supposed to be. So it's okay to miss stuff from our past, but our past is not the best. The best is yet to come for the believer, right? That hell, this is the closest we're ever getting to hell if you're a believer, which is pretty amazing. Heaven is what we should be looking forward to. And the longer you go in life, yes, sometimes we make mistakes, and growth is often like this, not like this. But God is working to make us more like Christ, even in the moments where we're not faithful. Now we're going to jump back to verse 9 and then hit 11 and 12. And we see here that wisdom helps us see life clearly. So verse 9 talks about anger. It's really easy to just fly off the handle, right? But it's dangerous to stay angry and even to be angry. We've got to consider why. Anger isn't wrong, but the reason we're angry might be. Oftentimes when I'm angry because I am at the center of my worldview, and so someone did something that bugged me or hurt me or whatever. It says, don't let anger lodge in your heart. So what do I do with that? Well, I can either hold on to it, shove it down, pretend like it's not there, which isn't true, or I can take that to God. And the goal there in taking it to God is, that can be a trite phrase that we use. It's laying down my emotions and then trying to help others see how amazing God is, how good God is, readjusting my perspective so that my life is not about me, my life is about enjoying how awesome God is, and a part of that is helping others see how awesome He is, and letting that inform my interactions with people. And he says wisdom is like wealth. It protects your life. And it's better than wealth because it helps you know what to do with money. If you got money and you're an idiot, you're going to run out of it, right? And then we come to the end so far it's been kind of proverby. It seems like Solomon jumps from one thing to another real quick throughout here. And verse 13 is the last verse like that. It says, "Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked." It's easy to look at this verse and just go, okay, so things are just going to always be as they're supposed to be, and I'm just supposed to deal with it. No, that's not it. That's not it. God wants us to come to him and say, and let him know how we're feeling, whether we hate our current circumstances or not. He wants to hear that from us. He wants a relationship with us, right? This verse applies to us in two main ways. One, God has a set way of things. And so if we're trying to justify our actions, if we're trying to turn something that is not okay into something that is okay, it's not going to happen, right? God already has his laws set forth in the universe, so we can't come around that. The other way this might happen is when life sucks. Like, I don't think God's going to lift the coronavirus quarantine, right? How do we respond to tough circumstances? It's okay to be frustrated and to be upset and ask God why and ask God for change. But at the end of the day, that ends in a trust of who God is. The goal is that brings us to a trust of God rather than a constant anger at God. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, and then now we're moving out of the proverby section and into the more of a verse-by-verse text section of Ecclesiastes 7. So from verses 14 to 18, Solomon talks about the righteous, the wicked, and life itself. God balances our lives to keep us humble and to keep us from knowing our future. And that's what it talks about with trials, right? So it's okay to enjoy the good days, and then in the bad ones, don't curse God, but instead realize, okay, God's doing something here, and, it's a good opportunity to analyze, okay, did I do something sinful that's an effect of this? Is it a consequence of my sin? But as we see in the story of Job, that's not always it either. Sometimes life is just hard and we don't know what God is doing, and that's when we come to him, right? We can ask him why, but and say, hey, I want this to change, but it comes back to trusting him that he's doing something outside of our control. And as a part of that, Solomon says that he's seen the righteous and the wicked. The righteous die early, and the wicked live long. That's again where we have to trust God that he's going to bring everything into judgment. That man's going to have to give an account for what he's done at the end of our lives. But in the meantime, that doesn't always make too much sense. And then Solomon says something that's a little surprising here. He says, "Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time?" We're like, hold on, aren't we supposed to be perfect as God is perfect? Like, Jesus says that. What the heck? So I think what he's getting at here is, don't assume that we have it all together, right? Those who are overly righteous, like the Pharisees thought they didn't need Jesus. They were like, I'm good enough on my own. No, we need to recognize that we need Jesus, and then we're trusting in him for his righteousness. And then on the same side as well, don't be dumb. Don't do the wrong thing, because you'll pay for it, right? And so the remedy to these things is, Solomon says, fearing God. And we've talked a lot about the fear of the Lord, but ultimately that culminates in a relationship with Jesus. And the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 1:30 talks about how Jesus is both our wisdom and our righteousness. Now there's a ton that could be said there, but I'm going to just say two things briefly. One, he's our wisdom, and that he shows us who we are and the condition of our hearts, and that we need him. And literally, this book is the most amazing thing. Can completely change how we live. And then secondly, Jesus is our righteousness. He makes us right before God. He brings us into a relationship with him. So you could dive into a much deeper explanation of that, but I'm just going to leave it there for you guys. So to wrap up that section of verses 14 to 18, basically there is no formula to life. Just because I'm doing the right thing doesn't mean I'm not going to die early. I could get cancer tomorrow. And at the same time, it's still wise and good that doesn't mean that I just go and do whatever I want. Because again, my heart is evil and I don't want to do those things anymore, to keep sinning. God puts a desire in us, for those of us who are believers, to not do that. We don't just do the right thing to get a result that we want. We do the right thing because we love God. So the point here is that God wants us to walk through life by faith in Him, in awe of who He is. Finally, these are the last 10 verses. Wisdom helps us face life stronger. Solomon says in verse 19 that wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city. That's a lot of rulers. They could get a lot done. And yet a wise man walking through life is stronger than they are. Teaches us how to live. And then throughout the rest of these verses, Solomon talks about life. First he says there's no one righteous. That's something we all hear. We know we're out of relationship with God, but really think about that. There's no one righteous. Everyone is evil. Even your nice next door neighbors, if they don't know Christ. Now I don't think they're going to break into your house and totally kill you and murder you in your sleep. It's not necessarily what this is getting at. It's not supposed to make us super paranoid and worried what everyone's going to do for us, or to us. But it does show us that all of us are broken. We're broken in different ways, but all of us are broken and need a Savior. And so the way I should interact with the world outside me is, I want to show you Jesus. I want to show you Jesus through how I live and through what I do. And also don't be surprised when people turn out to be evil. Right? Because none is righteous. Next, Solomon gives some practical advice for not worrying what people say about us. Because we do the same thing, right? It's easy to grumble and complain or just say things about people when we don't really know what's going on. So it's not always a good idea to take everything that people say to heart. Instead, we need to be aligned with God so that I have something outside of all these voices telling me different things. I need to know what He wants for my life and that I'm walking with Him in that. And then secondarily, again, having a community. We've talked about this a couple times. Having a community around me of a couple people. A lampshade just fell off my lamp. A community of people around us who also know what I'm going through and can walk through life with me. Next, we don't know all of what God is doing. Solomon talks about trying to apply all his wisdom. The wisest guy who ever lives talks about how he doesn't know. He tries to figure out what God's doing. He's like, I don't know. And that in itself is wise, to say, I don't know all that God is doing. I don't know completely what heaven's going to be like. He gives us small tastes of that. I don't know all of what walking in a relationship perfectly with Jesus is, because I'm not there yet. I don't know all of what God has planned tomorrow or the next day, but we can trust Him. And often I fall at the other end of that, where I think I know all of what's going on. That can be dangerous, because then I'm just going to do what I think is best, and that's not usually what's best. And then finally, Solomon loops back to there being no one righteous. He talks about a woman whose heart is a snare and a net, and whose hands are fetters. And oh man, maybe it's just the society now, but every time there's something that is just pointed out about women or just about men, I'm always like, I wonder what all the girls are thinking right now, or all the guys are thinking right now, depending on who's singled out here. And either way, whether it's a guy or a girl, whether you're a guy or a girl, there are people around us who are really dangerous to be in relationships with. It's a dangerous thing, and they don't look like what they are. How do we avoid that? How do we avoid entering relationships with dangerous people? Yes, we're called to be a light to some, but especially in dating relationships and marriage one day, how do we avoid someone that's like that? The verse talks about those who please God, avoid them. And the sinner falls in. Now, we're all sinners. None of us can please God on our own. So what is it talking about here? It's talking about daily walking with God. Once we've established that relationship with Jesus, and we start to want to walk with him, then we can truly avoid those kind of things. When we're walking day in and day out with Jesus, not that we're ever going to do that perfectly, but the stronger a relationship I build with Jesus, the less likely I am to fall into a really, really dangerous sin. None of us are perfect, but that's a way for us to stay close to God and away from sin. It's walking daily with God. And Solomon finished with how rare a righteous person there is to find, that even though we don't know what God is doing, instead of looking to him, all humanity has gone their own way, right? All of us have turned aside to seek out our own desires in a sinful way without Jesus. So there's a lot in this passage. But I just want to lay before you guys 3 applications, and they are questions that I want you to sit on and think about. I don't want to always have super easy application, go do this thing, but sit and think on these. Number 1, what will the sum total of my life be? One day, all of us are going to stand before Jesus. Am I going to lay my life before him and go, I don't know if this was enough. I'm sorry, I tried really, really, really hard. I did all these things for you. Can you let me into heaven? Or is it I just really lived for myself and did what I wanted and it all sucked, but I don't care? Or is it Jesus, I'm so imperfect. I continue to fail even after getting to know you, but I love you and I wanted to fall more in love with you, and here is, by your grace, what I was able to do through walking with you. Thank you for helping me with this. God, here's my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was yours. That's where we want to be. It's easy to answer that and to say, oh yeah, this is the right answer. And I don't want that from you guys. I want in here. That's what it's got to be. That doesn't happen overnight. Which falls into my next 2 questions. That's, who's at the center of my worldview? Who's at the center of every decision? And again, you guys all know the right answers, right? But then now, how do I implement that? How do I daily live to show others how awesome God is? Do I think, before even showing others how awesome God is, do I think that God is amazing and mind-blowing and he made trees and people and everything? And how often do I consider that? And how often do I live out of a sense of wonder for God? How often do you do that? I don't do that very well. I'm trying to continually get better at this. And that's what I should say with all these points as well. Is guys, I am right there in the boat with you, doing this completely imperfectly. I have days where I'm really mad at God and confused, and I don't understand. But where I want to be is in a place of, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I love you. I want to live my life for you. Not just I check boxes, but I live my life for you. And finally, am I walking with God daily? We don't earn salvation by what we do. We don't earn salvation by how many Bible verses we read. But if we truly love God, then we will be walking with him daily. And as a part of that, if you get a couple people around you and you are just gut-wrenchingly real with them, and they love Jesus and you love Jesus, that's one of the best things you can do. Yeah, so that's it. How do you want your life to shape out? Every choice we make determines how we're going to be remembered. Who's at the center of your worldview? 3, walk with God daily. Walk in community with others. Miss you all. I will see you hopefully soon. I'm excited to see you all.